Here today. A high school track meet yesterday turned deadly. 17-year-old football star Austin Metcalf was stabbed in the heart and left to die in his twin brother's arms after a fight broke out yesterday. The suspect was allegedly told he was sitting in the wrong seat in the stands of the stadium before drawing a knife and attacking Austin. Police have yet to reveal what led up to that moment, but we do know the other student has been charged with murder. Joining me now is Austin's mother, Megan Metcalf, and his twin brother, Hunter. Megan.
April 2nd, 2025 began like any other spring day at Kuykendall Stadium in Frisco, Texas. The morning sun beat down on the track as students from various high schools gathered for a routine meet. Among them was 17-year-old Austin Metcalf, a junior at Memorial High School with a perfect 4.0 GPA and MVP linebacker status, setting up with his teammates under their designated tent. No one could have predicted that within minutes, this ordinary school event would transform into a scene of chaos and tragedy. Touch me and see what happens. These words, spoken in anger during what should have been a minor disagreement over seating, would be the prelude to violence that ended a promising young life in less than 30 seconds. Austin's twin brother Hunter watched in horror as a confrontation over something so trivial, asking another student to move from their team area, escalated with shocking speed. One moment, Austin was standing his ground. The next, he lay bleeding from a single stab wound to the chest. The stadium fell silent, then erupted in panic. Coaches rushed forward. Athletic trainers attempted emergency care. Parents in the stands, including some who had simply come to cheer on their children, became unwitting witnesses to a nightmare. "Is he going to be okay?" the alleged attacker reportedly asked officers during his arrest, the gravity of his actions seemingly just beginning to register. But for Austin Metcalf, star athlete, devoted Christian, beloved son and brother, it was already too late. This isn't just another headline about youth violence. This is the story of how a community once named among America's safest was forced to confront uncomfortable questions about security, conflict resolution, and the fragility of life. Before we continue with Austin's story, take a moment to subscribe to Dark Trace Crime Stories. Each week, we examine cases that challenge our understanding of human behavior and society. If you're watching this from a school or community that's experienced similar tragedy, share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective matters in this important conversation. Now let's look deeper into who Austin Metcalf was, and how a single moment of conflict at a high school track meet ended with one teenager dead and another facing murder charges. Austin Metcalf wasn't just another statistic. He was a young man whose life touched many before it was cut tragically short. Born and raised in Frisco, Texas, Austin grew up in what many would consider an ideal environment. Frisco had recently been recognized as one of America's safest cities, a place where families moved to escape the dangers of urban life. The bond between Austin and his twin brother, Hunter, transcended typical sibling relationships. Born just 4 minutes apart, they shared not only physical resemblance, but a profound connection that shaped both their identities. Hunter often spoke of looking up to Austin, despite their minimal age difference. "Austin was always my leader," Hunter would later recall in heartbreaking testimony. "He showed me how to face challenges, how to stand firm in faith when things got tough." The twins participated in athletics together, pushed each other academically, and shared the everyday moments that formed the foundation of brotherhood. They were fixtures in each other's lives, in classrooms, on athletic fields, and at church services. This made Hunter's presence during the fatal altercation all the more devastating. He witnessed not just the loss of a brother, but of his closest friend and confidant. At Memorial High School, Austin had established himself as exceptional both in academics and athletics. Maintaining a perfect 4.0 GPA while excelling in sports demonstrated his discipline and work ethic. As the MVP linebacker for the school's football team, Austin earned respect from teammates and opponents alike. His coaches noted his natural leadership abilities. He led by example, pushing himself harder than anyone else during practices and inspiring others to elevate their performance. Track and field provided another outlet for Austin's competitive spirit. The irony that his life would end at a track meet, a place where he had experienced so much success and joy, adds another layer of tragedy to his story. Faith formed the cornerstone of Austin's identity. The Metcalf family were active members of Hope Fellowship Church in Frisco, where Austin's spiritual convictions deepened as he matured. His final social media post revealed his mindset: faith that God got me red heart and my work will pay off. These words, which would later be shared thousands of times as people mourned his death, captured the essence of who Austin was: a young man who believed in divine purpose and the value of perseverance. Jeff and Megan Metcalf raised their sons with an emphasis on faith, responsibility, and compassion. They were present at games and school events, actively involved in their sons' development. The family unit was tight-knit, providing stability and support that allowed both boys to flourish. Austin never met someone he couldn't connect with, a classmate would later tell local reporters. He had this way of making you feel important, like what you had to say mattered to him. That's rare in high school. Teachers described Austin as intellectually curious and respectful, a student who engaged meaningfully with material rather than simply pursuing grades. He wanted to understand, not just memorize, one educator noted. He asked questions that showed he was thinking beyond the classroom. Coaches saw his potential extending far beyond high school athletics. With his combination of academic excellence and athletic prowess, college recruiters had already begun to take notice of Austin. Scholarships seemed inevitable, with several Division I schools expressing interest in the junior linebacker. He was the kind of player who made everyone around him better, his football coach remarked. Not just through his skill, but through his attitude. Austin brought intensity to practice every day, but never at the expense of sportsmanship. What emerges from these testimonials is the portrait of a young man who seemed to have everything going for him: talent, intelligence, faith, family support, and character. Austin Metcalf wasn't perfect, no teenager is, but he represented the best of what parents hope their children will become: responsible, kind, driven, and grounded in values larger than themselves. This makes what happened on April 2nd, 2025, not just shocking, but profoundly unjust. A promising life extinguished over what should have been nothing more than a momentary disagreement. April 2nd, 2025 dawned bright in Frisco, Texas. For the Metcalf family, it was supposed to be just another Wednesday, a school day featuring a track meet at Kuykendall Stadium, where both Austin and Hunter would compete for Memorial High School. Jeff and Megan Metcalf had planned to attend later that day, as they regularly did to support their sons' athletic endeavors. By 9:30 a.m., students from various schools across the district had begun arriving at the stadium. The atmosphere was typical of high school sporting events, a mix of competitive energy and teenage socialization. Teams claimed their designated areas, setting up tents and preparing for their events. Memorial High School had their usual spot, where Austin, Hunter, and their teammates gathered. Around 10 a.m., what should have been a routine track meet took its first step toward tragedy. According to witness statements and police reports, Austin and Hunter noticed a student they didn't recognize sitting in their team's designated area. This student was later identified as Carmelo Anthony, a junior from Centennial High School, another Frisco institution. The initial interaction seemed innocuous enough. Hunter would later recall that they politely asked Anthony to move, as the area was reserved for Memorial High team members. It was the kind of minor territorial dispute that happens countless times at school events without incident. A simple request that should have resulted in either compliance or, at worst, a brief verbal disagreement. Instead, Anthony reportedly responded with immediate hostility. Witnesses described his demeanor as disproportionately aggressive given the nature of the request. He seemed angry from the start, one student later told investigators, like he was already looking for a confrontation. As the tension escalated, Austin stepped forward, perhaps instinctively moving to protect his brother or defuse the situation. According to multiple accounts, Anthony issued a direct challenge: "Touch me and see what happens." The words carried an unmistakable threat, but few could have anticipated what would follow. When Austin attempted to physically move Anthony from the team area, Anthony reached into his backpack. In one fluid motion, he pulled out a black knife and thrust it into Austin's chest. The entire altercation, from initial request to the stabbing, lasted less than 30 seconds. The reaction was immediate. Hunter rushed to his brother's side as Anthony fled the scene. Athletic trainers and coaches converged on Austin, who had collapsed to the ground. Blood spread across his shirt as first responders were urgently called. Students scattered in panic, some running for help, others frozen in shock at what they had just witnessed. "I held him," Hunter would later recount through tears. "I just kept telling him to stay with me, that help was coming." This moment, a brother cradling his twin as life slipped away, would haunt Hunter and everyone else present that day. Emergency medical technicians arrived within minutes and immediately began resuscitation efforts. They worked frantically as they transported Austin to the nearest hospital. Despite their best efforts, and those of the hospital staff who continued emergency procedures upon arrival, Austin Metcalf was pronounced dead within minutes of reaching the medical facility. The cause of death was a single stab wound to the chest. The knife had penetrated with deadly precision, striking vital organs. Medical examiners would later confirm that even with immediate medical attention, Austin's chances of survival had been minimal given the nature of the injury. Back at the stadium, chaos reigned. School officials quickly implemented lockdown procedures while police secured the scene. Parents who had been contacted began arriving, desperate for information about their children's safety. The track meet, of course, was canceled as the stadium transformed into a crime scene. Police launched an immediate search for Carmelo Anthony, who had fled on foot. Using descriptions from witnesses, officers located him not far from the stadium. According to arrest reports, Anthony appeared visibly distressed when apprehended, repeatedly asking, "Is he going to be okay?" and questioning whether his actions could be considered self-defense. News of the stabbing spread rapidly through social media, often outpacing official information channels. By early afternoon, before the Metcalf family had even had time to process their loss, hashtags related to the incident were trending locally. Misinformation mixed with facts, as the community struggled to understand what had happened. I want to pause here and ask, where are you watching this video from? Have incidents of school violence affected your community? Share your location and thoughts in the comments below. Your experiences matter in this ongoing conversation about youth violence and school safety. As the sun set on April 2nd, two families' lives had been irrevocably altered. The Metcalfs facing an unimaginable loss, and Anthony's family confronting the reality that their son was now facing murder charges. For the broader Frisco community, long considered a safe haven, fundamental assumptions about security and youth violence were shattered in less than a minute of conflict. The Frisco Police Department responded to the emergency call from Kuykendall Stadium with remarkable speed. Within minutes of the stabbing, officers had secured the perimeter and begun collecting witness statements from dozens of stunned teenagers and staff members. The consistency of these accounts painted a clear picture of what had transpired, a disagreement over seating that escalated with shocking rapidity to lethal violence. Officers quickly established a command center at the stadium while dispatching units to search for the suspect. Using descriptions provided by witnesses, many of whom knew Carmelo Anthony by name, police began a systematic search of the surrounding area. They operated with urgency, aware that an armed suspect was potentially still in the vicinity of multiple schools. The search for Anthony proved relatively brief. Officers located him less than a mile from the stadium, walking alone. According to the arrest report, when officers approached with weapons drawn, Anthony immediately raised his hands and offered no resistance. The knife, later confirmed as the murder weapon through forensic testing, was recovered from a nearby trash can where Anthony had apparently discarded it during his flight. What struck officers during the initial arrest was Anthony's emotional state. Rather than displaying continued aggression or attempting to justify his actions, he appeared visibly distressed. "Is he going to be okay?" he reportedly asked officers multiple times during his detainment. When informed that Austin Metcalf had been transported to the hospital in critical condition, Anthony began to cry. During transport to the police station, Anthony made several spontaneous statements that would later become significant in the investigation. It was self-defense, he told officers. He was coming at me. He also asked, "Can it be self-defense if I warned him first?" These statements, made without prompting and prior to any Miranda warnings, would later be deemed admissible in court proceedings. At the police station, after being properly advised of his rights, Anthony provided a formal statement. He claimed he had felt threatened when Austin and Hunter approached him, though this account contradicted numerous witness statements, describing the initial interaction as non-threatening. Anthony acknowledged bringing the knife to the track meet, but insisted he had no intention of using it when the day began. The Frisco Police Department moved quickly to process evidence and formalize charges. By evening, less than 8 hours after the incident, the Collin County District Attorney's Office had filed murder charges against Carmelo Anthony. Despite being 17, Anthony would be charged as an adult under Texas law, facing a potential sentence of 5 to 99 years if convicted. In a development that would later spark community outrage, Anthony, who had maintained a 3.7 GPA at Frisco Centennial High School, was allowed to graduate and receive his diploma despite facing murder charges. The Next Generation Action Network, an advocacy group supporting Anthony's family, announced in May 2025, "We are proud to share that Carmelo Anthony will graduate and receive his high school diploma, and that his academic achievements will not be disrupted." Frisco ISD Superintendent Mike Waldrop clarified that while Anthony would receive his diploma, he would not be permitted to participate in the May 22nd graduation ceremony, stating, "No student who commits a serious criminal offense is permitted to participate in the graduation ceremony." This decision intensified tensions in the community, with Austin's father publicly questioning how someone charged with murdering his son could still be honored with a diploma. The investigation continued to expand in the days following the stabbing. Police executed search warrants for Anthony's home and school locker, seeking evidence of premeditation or prior conflicts with Austin Metcalf. They also examined both students' social media accounts and cell phone records, looking for any digital trail that might explain the violent outburst. According to official statements, no evidence of previous interaction between the two students was discovered. As news of the stabbing and subsequent arrests spread throughout Frisco, the community's reaction was one of profound shock. Frisco had long prided itself on being a safe haven for families, a place where violent crime, particularly among youth, was rare. The stabbing at Kuykendall Stadium shattered this sense of security. Parents demanded answers from school officials about security measures at sporting events. How had a student brought a knife to a track meet? Were metal detectors or bag checks being considered for future events? The school district held an emergency meeting the evening after the stabbing, with hundreds of concerned parents in attendance. Social media platforms became forums for grief, outrage, and speculation. Hashtags like #JusticeForAustin and #FriscoStrong began trending locally. Unfortunately, misinformation also spread rapidly, with unfounded rumors about both Austin and Carmelo circulating widely before officials could correct the record. The case quickly attracted media attention beyond local outlets. National news organizations descended on Frisco, framing the story within broader narratives about youth violence and school safety. This external scrutiny added another layer of pressure to a community already struggling to process what had happened. Perhaps most troubling was the emergence of threats against both families involved. The Metcalfs, despite being victims, experienced a swatting incident in which approximately 20 officers searched their home following a false report of gunshots. Anthony's family also received threats, forcing them to temporarily relocate for their safety. As the legal process began to unfold, the community found itself divided between calls for maximum punishment and those urging a more nuanced examination of the factors that had led to this tragedy. What remained undisputed was that two families' lives had been forever altered by 30 seconds of violence that most still struggle to comprehend. What do you think about Carmelo Anthony being allowed to graduate and receive his diploma while facing murder charges? Is it right for a school district to honor the academic achievements of a student accused of taking another student's life? Or should his education be put on hold until after the legal process concludes? Share your thoughts in the comments below and let us know where you're watching from. Has your community ever faced similar difficult decisions about balancing educational rights with serious criminal allegations? Your perspective matters in this complex conversation about justice, education, and community values. In the aftermath of Austin's death, the Metcalf family displayed extraordinary strength in the face of unimaginable loss. Jeff and Megan Metcalf, devastated parents who had sent their son to school that morning with no inkling of the tragedy to come, found themselves thrust into a spotlight they never sought. Their response would come to define not just their personal journey through grief, but would also provide a powerful example to their community. Jeff Metcalf's words at a press conference just 3 days after losing his son left many in attendance stunned. "You know what? I already forgive this person. Already," he stated, his voice steady despite visible emotion. "God takes care of things. God is going to take care of me. God is going to take care of my family." This declaration of forgiveness, coming so soon after such a senseless loss, demonstrated the depth of the family's faith and their commitment to living by its principles even in their darkest hour. Megan Metcalf, while sharing her husband's faith, acknowledged her struggle with anger and grief. "I'm still processing everything," she admitted. "I'm angry. I'm heartbroken. But I know Austin wouldn't want hatred to be his legacy." She used her platform to urge other parents to cherish every moment with their children, a poignant reminder of life's fragility that resonated with many. For Hunter Metcalf, the loss was uniquely devastating. Beyond losing a brother, he had witnessed the violent act that took Austin's life. In his first public statement, delivered at a memorial service at Hope Fellowship Church, Hunter spoke through tears about the void left in his life. "He wasn't just my brother. He was my best friend, my teammate, the person I looked up to most," Hunter said. "I keep expecting him to walk through the door, to text me, to be there when I turn around." Hunter's testimony about the events at Kuykendall Stadium provided crucial details for investigators, while also revealing the trauma he continued to experience. "I keep replaying it in my mind, wondering if there was something I could have done differently," he confessed. Mental health professionals were quickly brought in to help Hunter and other students who had witnessed the stabbing process their trauma. The Frisco community rallied around the Metcalf family with remarkable speed and generosity. Hope Fellowship Church became the epicenter of community support, hosting a vigil evening after Austin's death that drew over 1,000 attendees. The parking lot overflowed as people from across Frisco, many who had never met Austin, came to show solidarity with the grieving family. Students from Memorial High School created a memorial at Austin's locker, covering it with notes, photos, and mementos. The football team announced they would retire Austin's jersey number and dedicate their upcoming season to his memory. Rival schools throughout the district showed support by wearing Memorial High's colors at their own events. On social media, Austin's final post about faith became a rallying point, shared thousands of times with messages of support for the family. The hashtag #LiveLikeAustin began trending as former classmates and friends shared stories about his character and positive influence. Financial support poured in as well. 2 separate GoFundMe campaigns launched by family friends raised over $280,000 combined within a week of Austin's death. These funds were designated to help with funeral expenses and to establish a scholarship in Austin's name for future Memorial High School students who exemplified his character and values. Local businesses contributed as well. Restaurants held fundraising nights, donating percentages of their proceeds to the Metcalf family. T-shirts bearing Austin's football number and the words "Faith that God got me" sold out multiple printings, with all profits going to the scholarship fund. Through their grace and tragedy, the Metcalfs transformed what could have been solely a story of senseless violence into one that also highlighted the power of faith, forgiveness, and community. Their response became a crucial part of Frisco's collective healing process, even as they navigated their own profound grief.
The sad part about it is he died in his brother's arms. They were twins, identical twins. And his brother was holding on to him, trying to make it stop bleeding. And he died in his brother's arms. And I rushed up there, and I saw him on the gurney. And I could tell. They said he wasn't breathing. And I could see all the blood. And I saw where the wound was.
Understandably still in shock, Jeff Metcalf says a precious memory was made just this past weekend when he took his twin boys hunting. That's where Austin got his first hog. Well, this morning at around 10, he rushed here to Kirkendall Stadium where the Memorial High School student athlete suffered a fatal stab wound during this track and field meet. Frisco police say a fight broke out between...
What kind of parents did this child have? What was he taught? He brought a knife to a track meet, and he murdered my son by stabbing him in the heart. The guy was in the wrong place. They asked him to move, and he bowed up. This is murder. I don't know. I know they have someone in custody.
Yeah, they do.
And you know what? I already forgive this person.
Already?
Already. God takes care of things. God's going to take care of me. God's going to take care of my family.
Austin Metcalf's death didn't occur in isolation. It represents part of a troubling pattern of youth violence that continues to challenge communities across America. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, homicide remains a leading cause of death for individuals aged 10 to 24, with thousands of young lives lost annually. What makes Austin's case particularly jarring is that it happened in Frisco, a city recently recognized as one of America's safest. The incident at Kuykendall Stadium forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. How does a disagreement over seating escalate to fatal violence in seconds? What factors contribute to youth carrying weapons to school events? And perhaps most importantly, how can similar tragedies be prevented? Data from a National Center for Education Statistics shows that while extreme violence in schools remains statistically rare, the number of students who report carrying weapons to school has remained stubbornly consistent over the past decade. Approximately 3 to 5% of high school students admit to bringing a weapon onto school property at least once during the academic year. This translates to hundreds of thousands of instances nationwide where weapons are present in educational settings. In Frisco ISD, like many school districts, safety protocols were in place but had notable gaps. While the district employed school resource officers and conducted regular safety drills, security at athletic events operated differently than during regular school hours. Bag checks were inconsistent, and metal detectors were not utilized at outdoor sporting events like track meets. This created vulnerability that Carmelo Anthony exploited, intentionally or not, when he brought a knife to Kuykendall Stadium. Following Austin's death, the district implemented immediate changes. All athletic events, regardless of venue, now require clear bags only. Metal detector wands are used at entry points, and additional security personnel have been hired. While these measures might have prevented Anthony from bringing a weapon to the track meet, they represent reactive rather than preventive approaches to youth violence. Education experts point out that physical security measures, while necessary, address symptoms rather than causes. Dr. James Thompson, a specialist in adolescent psychology who consulted with Frisco ISD after the incident, emphasized this point. Metal detectors and clear backpacks might keep weapons out, but they don't address why a student wants to bring a weapon in the first place. That requires deeper intervention. Were there warning signs in Carmelo Anthony's behavior that went unnoticed? Initial investigations revealed that Anthony had no documented history of violent behavior at school. His academic record was average, and he participated in no extracurricular activities. He maintained a small social circle and, according to classmates, kept to himself. This profile, a student who flies under the radar, presents particular challenges for intervention. However, subsequent interviews with Anthony's peers revealed subtle indicators that might have warranted attention. Several classmates described him as quick to anger in social situations. One teacher noted that he seemed increasingly withdrawn in the weeks before the incident. These observations, while insufficient to predict violence, highlight the importance of comprehensive approaches to student well-being. Experts in youth violence prevention emphasize several key strategies that schools and communities can implement. Building strong relationships between students and adults creates environments where young people feel connected and valued. When students trust teachers, counselors, or coaches, they're more likely to seek help when needed and less likely to resort to violence. Frisco ISD has since expanded its mentorship programs, pairing at-risk students with supportive adults. Teaching effective conflict resolution skills equips students to handle disagreements without escalation. Many schools now incorporate social-emotional learning into their curricula, helping students develop empathy, emotional regulation, and problem-solving abilities. Memorial High School introduced a peer mediation program in the fall semester following Austin's death. Early identification of students experiencing difficulties allows for timely intervention. This requires training staff to recognize behavioral changes and establishing clear protocols for addressing concerns. Frisco ISD implemented enhanced training for all personnel, focusing on identifying students who might be struggling with emotional or behavioral issues. Anonymous reporting systems empower students to share concerns without fear of retaliation. Following the tragedy, Frisco ISD expanded its anonymous tip line and created a smartphone app specifically for reporting safety concerns. In the first 6 months after implementation, the system received over 200 reports, several of which led to interventions for students in crisis. Community involvement extends prevention beyond school grounds. Programs connecting young people to positive activities and supportive adults can reduce risk factors for violence. Frisco's Parks and Recreation Department partnered with local youth organizations to expand after-school and weekend programs, particularly targeting teenagers who might otherwise lack structured activities. The effectiveness of these approaches depends on consistent implementation and adequate resources. As Dr. Thompson noted, prevention isn't a one-time fix. It requires ongoing commitment from schools, families, and communities working together. While no system can guarantee the prevention of every violent incident, comprehensive approaches that address both physical security and underlying causes offer the best hope for reducing youth violence. Austin Metcalf's tragic death has become a catalyst for such efforts in Frisco, a community determined that no other family should experience similar loss. If you're watching this video and recognize warning signs in someone you know, don't wait to seek help. Resources exist in every community for youth in crisis, and your intervention could prevent another tragedy. Austin Metcalf's life was cut short at just 17 years old, a stark reminder of how quickly everything can change. One moment, he was a high school junior with a perfect GPA and athletic scholarships on the horizon. The next, he became a statistic in America's ongoing struggle with youth violence. His story forces us to confront not just the tragedy of what happened, but what it reveals about our society and what we might learn from it. Perhaps the most immediate lesson from Austin's death is the fragility of human life. In just 30 seconds, a minor disagreement transformed into a fatal encounter. There was no prolonged conflict, no history of animosity between Austin and Carmelo Anthony. Just a momentary interaction that spiraled beyond control. This reality is difficult to accept precisely because it highlights how vulnerable we all are, how thin the line between safety and danger can be. Jeff Metcalf touched on this when speaking at his son's funeral. We are not guaranteed tomorrow. Austin knew that. It's why he lived with purpose every day. The sudden loss of someone so young and promising reminds us to value each day and each relationship, understanding that ordinary moments, like attending a track meet, can become defining ones without warning. Austin's death also underscores the critical importance of conflict resolution skills for young people. The confrontation at Kuykendall Stadium escalated rapidly because neither teenager had the tools to de-escalate the situation. When Anthony said, "Touch me and see what happens," and Austin responded by attempting to physically move him, both young men made choices that reflected a lack of alternative strategies for resolving conflict. Educational psychologists point out that conflict resolution isn't innate. It must be taught and practiced. Many schools now recognize this need and have implemented programs that teach students to recognize emotional triggers, communicate effectively during disagreements, and find compromise. These skills aren't just academic exercises. As Austin's case tragically demonstrates, they can be matters of life and death. The call for improved safety measures in schools has grown louder in the wake of Austin's death. While Frisco ISD had safety protocols in place, the ease with which Anthony brought a knife to a school event revealed significant gaps in security. The balance between creating open, welcoming educational environments and ensuring student safety remains challenging. But Austin's story suggests that more comprehensive approaches are needed. Beyond metal detectors and clear backpack policies, experts advocate for multi-layered safety strategies that include threat assessment teams, anonymous reporting systems, and mental health resources. The goal isn't to transform schools into fortresses, but to create environments where potential threats can be identified and addressed before they lead to violence. Perhaps the most meaningful way to honor Austin's memory is through positive community action. The Metcalf family has led by example, channeling their grief into initiatives that might prevent similar tragedies. The Austin Metcalf Foundation, established with funds from community donations, now provides scholarships to students who demonstrate leadership and character. It also funds conflict resolution programs in schools throughout Texas. Memorial High School transformed its approach to student well-being following Austin's death. The football team, where Austin had been a standout linebacker, now participates in community service projects focused on youth mentorship. Team members visit middle schools to talk about handling peer pressure and resolving conflicts peacefully, conversations that might have seemed unnecessary before April 2nd, 2025. Faith communities in Frisco have also responded to the tragedy by creating safe spaces for young people to discuss their fears, frustrations, and challenges. Hope Fellowship Church, where the Metcalf family worshiped, now hosts weekly youth forums where teenagers can speak openly about issues they face, with trained counselors available to provide guidance. These community responses reflect a determination that Austin's death will not be in vain, that something meaningful will emerge from senseless tragedy. As one Memorial High student put it during a remembrance event, Austin always made things better wherever he went. Now it's our job to make things better in his name. The lessons from Austin's story extend beyond Frisco, Texas. Every community faces the challenge of protecting its young people while helping them develop into responsible adults. Every school must balance security with openness. Every parent must prepare children for independence while keeping them safe. Austin Metcalf, student, athlete, brother, son, never intended to become a symbol or a cautionary tale. He was simply living his life with the faith and purpose that defined him. Yet his story now serves as both a heartbreaking reminder of what can be lost in an instant and an urgent call to ensure that such losses become increasingly rare. By examining what happened at Kuykendall Stadium that April morning, perhaps we can build communities where disagreements end in resolution rather than violence, where young lives reach their full potential rather than being cut tragically short. The stabbing death of Austin Metcalf at Kuykendall Stadium continues to reverberate through Frisco and beyond. What began as a routine track meet became a flashpoint that forced an entire community to re-examine assumptions about youth violence, school safety, and conflict resolution. The ripple effects of those 30 seconds on April 2nd, 2025, will be felt for years to come. As of this recording, Carmelo Anthony remains in custody awaiting trial on murder charges. His legal team has indicated they plan to pursue a self-defense strategy, though prosecutors maintain that the evidence, including multiple witness statements, contradicts this claim. The trial, scheduled to begin next month, will likely reignite public debate about appropriate consequences and whether the justice system adequately addresses the complexities of youth violence. Meanwhile, the Metcalf family continues their difficult journey through grief. Hunter has returned to school and athletics, wearing his brother's number on his jersey. Jeff and Megan have become reluctant but powerful advocates for school safety reforms, testifying before the state legislature in support of a bill that would standardize security protocols at school events. The bill, informally known as Austin's Law, has gained bipartisan support. The true measure of impact, however, lies not in legal proceedings or policy changes, but in how Austin's story changes individual behavior. Have students thought differently about how they handle conflicts? Have parents had difficult but necessary conversations with their children about violence? Have communities invested in prevention rather than simply reacting to tragedy? If you've been affected by Austin's story, please share your thoughts in the comments below. What changes have you seen in your own school or community regarding safety and conflict resolution? Your experiences and perspectives add valuable dimensions to this ongoing conversation. If this video has provided insight or value, please consider liking and subscribing to Darktrace Crime Stories. Next week, we'll examine another case that challenges our understanding of human behavior and society's response to tragedy. Remember that behind every headline and statistic is a human story, a life like Austin's, full of promise and potential. By learning from these stories, perhaps we can create communities where such potential is fulfilled rather than extinguished.